guess it's recording, right? It says
Yeah, it shows in my corner that it's recording.
um good afternoon, Hubble and Katie. Well,
Hello.
how are you doing today?
Great.
Great. All right.
I'd probably be better if I was doing something else, but I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, it's not easy to enter couples counseling, marriage counseling. It's a difficult choice, but I think that it's a good choice. So tell me a little bit about what's going on and a little bit about yourselves. Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and go first. Uh, when Katie and I first met, I'll be completely honest, her penchant for being politically active and being um, involved in things was attractive to me. I was not used to a woman of that nature. I was not used to a woman who would speak her own mind and speak up for other people. And at first it made things exciting, but now I want things to be a little more serious and a little more like a couple that I'm used to, and she doesn't seem to want that.
Mhm. Well, this is your perspective, right? And Tanisha, and tell me a little bit about um, what what's going on in the marriage for you.
Um, well, I am an activist. I believe in staying politically sound and just support the causes that I am passionate about. And for whatever reason, Hubble seems to have a problem with that. I've been the same way consistently throughout the relationship, and I don't feel like I need to change. What I do is very important, and it makes a difference in the world and the government. So I just really wish that he would be more supportive of my passions and the things that I'm doing.
So you definitely have two different ways of looking at the world. I see, Katie, that you definitely love the social activism. You love being involved. You love to really help other people, and especially if they are struggling in their lives, you like to stand up for them. And Hubble, from what I hear, is that you were once really into that, but not so much nowadays. Is it so within the marriage? This is getting in the way. Both of your personalities are clashing at this point. I guess what I would like to focus on is perhaps some of the there are four aspects that when we're talking about marriage, especially marriages that are in the rocks or having a difficult time. There's four things that we might want to look at closely that might help you address some of the issues. And one of them is being critical of one another. Um, and I hear a lot of that. Both of you are very critical of one another. Another one is contempt, attacking a sense of self with or intent to insult or abuse. So having contempt for what the other one is saying. And this leads to obviously defensiveness. Both of you seem to be defensive in hearing one another's. And the last one is stonewalling. When we become defensive, we usually stonewall. We don't want to hear the other side. So perhaps what we can do is we can kind of address some of these things and see which are some other ways that we can look at. And when we go back to criticism, I think what's important is that when we are talking to one another, we want to be, if we've gotten into the act of attacking one another, what we can do is we could start by using I statements like I feel, I sense, just to talk about the marriage so the individual is able to understand how you are feeling or what's going on rather than just hearing attacks and right away building up a defense system and not hearing each other right away. So, um, Katie, you talk about your social activism. Um, in in which ways is Hubble being critical?
Well, one statement that's been made is that it makes him look bad. It ruins his reputation.
Okay. And what is another way that perhaps you could tell Hubble how you feel about that using an I statement to engage him in how what's going on emotionally inside of you?
I feel like you minimize my work and what I do. I feel like you're trying to make me a different person.
In Hubble, has she expressed these type of feelings to you? And how do you feel about it using an I statement?
Um, I have not heard those exact phrases, but perhaps things that could be interpreted that way before. Um, I feel that at this point in our lives together, devoting so much time and energy to causes outside of our own family is doing a disservice. I have expressed a desire for a family with a wife who's willing to be in the home to take care of the children, and I hope that it would be with her.
Mhm. So you have the culture of marriage that's going on between you two. You have your individual ways that you look at the world. Each of you, right, Hubble, you look at the world differently than Katie does, but at the same time, you've come together in marriage. So there's the culture there that attracts you to why you're together. And one of the things that I hear also, the second um, criticism is obviously content. But one of the things that we want to do is kind of work on identifying the cultures that you each have and learning to appreciate what both of you bring to marriage. Um, I guess one thing that I would ask perhaps Hubble is what's something that you find um, enjoyable about being with Katie? Something that you love about her?
Well, there's usually no lack for things to talk about. It's just a matter of whether or not they're talked about or yelled about, I guess. So there's always conversation of one type or another.
And Katie, what's something that Hubble brings to the marriage?
Um,
It's got to be something.
well, Hubble's very successful at what he does. I do feel like he could be more successful. He's kind of settling on comedy when he could be doing more Edgar Allan Poe level work. But what he does is very successful. Um, we're taken care of financially. Um, there's no lack of intimacy, but when it comes to like my thoughts and my passions, when it comes to my work, what's important to me, it's minimized. And I'm supposed to just be a housewife making babies and let go of my activism, and that's a part of who I am.
And Hubble, when you hear this, is this how you feel about about what Katie is saying, or perhaps is there something more um, than that?
Well, I'm not looking for it to be given up altogether. I know that it's important, and I know that it's something that Katie's done for a long time, but I would hope that with the idea of starting a family, that those things could be put on the back burner for a little while so that we could maybe start that family that we talk about and not spend so much time devoted to things that are in service to other people and do something for ourselves for once.
And Katie, what are your thoughts about that? And again, remember one of the things that that we want to focus on is, of course, to a certain degree, we're trying to find a compromise here, right? Between what you enjoy individually, but also when you come together. there might be some middle ground where you can both enjoy um, the personal careers that you both have individually, but at the same time value the time that you have each other and respect all that. As far as what Katie had, as far as what Hubble has said, Katie,
Well, I mean, I obviously want a family as well, but I don't feel that the roles have to be so strict as far as this is what the modern wife does. Stays home with the children and that's your everything. I mean, it's like it's more to life than just making babies.
Hubble, would you be able to kind of like what Katie has just said, perhaps take that and kind of put some thought into it and see how you can make perhaps space for that.
Well, with the way that I was raised, that was a woman's job. They were the givers of life and the people who cared for the children, whether it was nannies or mothers or maids or whoever. That was what they did. And the attraction to Katie was the novelty of the fact that she wasn't that type of woman, but I'm at a point in my life now where that's the type of woman that I want, that I'm looking for. And I had hoped that Katie would be willing to come along with me on that journey.
I hear a lot of defensiveness from both of you, which is, the third aspect of what we are talking about. Um, I hear a lot of blaming of the other. I think one of the things that's important is that we take responsibility for perhaps some of the thoughts or some of the things that we say to one another, and by being mindful of some of these thoughts or some of these feelings or some of these statements that we're making, it allows us to take responsibility with what's going on inside of us and kind of engage with ourselves. So you both want certain careers. Um, Perhaps as far as taking or accepting your partner's perspective, what are some things that you could take or accept as far as your partner's perspective of how you both see the world? What can you engage and perhaps lean into a little more, even though it might be discomforting? Katie.
Um, I think we could start a family and still be able to be who we are.
Mhm. And Hubble, what are your thoughts about that?
I don't really know. I mean, I would love to see things work out to where we could both stay the people that we are while also having children, but that raises more questions. How much different are we going to be as parents? How are we going to reconcile those differences considering we're here because we can't even agree to have children, let alone, then have them and one of us be more or less something or not something, and have that whole conflict come when there are children now involved.
Mhm. Katie? What is your responsibility in what Hubble has just stated, rather than perhaps looking at him and reacting to what he is saying? How can you take it and perhaps take responsibility, or how can we sometimes take responsibility to what we are feeling to kind of help the process along?
Well, I've already said that I am willing to have children. and I'm willing to minimize some of my activism, but I'm not going to eliminate it or completely put it on the back burner.
How about, do you feel that she has to put everything on the back burner and just be the wife that you, I guess, perhaps would like her to be?
I guess it would depend on what is being minimized and how. What part of the activism and the advocacy is going to be minimized, and what's going to be kept? Is there going to be something going on that she gets involved in that's going to put a child in danger? Is there, something that's going to potentially put her health at risk? Is there something that could be politically embarrassing and ruin my career so that my end of taking care of my family is no longer available?
Then there's a lot of fear in this. And what happens when we are working from a place of fear, even within a marriage, with each individual? What happens when those things happen, Katie? If you're working from a place of fear, do we can you see the clear? Can you sometimes see clearly, or that sometimes we may not always see what's in front of us?
Well, I can agree that sometimes fear can probably make us not be, or make us blind to the reality of the situation. Um, it can create anxiety. I can see how it can be stressful,
And how
but
about,
I would also be distressed having to give up that part of me completely and become this homebody that I've never been.
and how about what does the role of fear play in your relationship currently? Which actually takes us to the fourth aspect, which is stonewalling. Oftentimes, fear creates
Mhm.
a wall that we create in order to defend ourselves. So, what role does fear play in stonewalling? Sometimes, what the communication within the relationship?
Well, there are often times where we'll start discussions and neither of us can come to any kind of a compromise or even a level where we're willing to conversate, and we both quiet hours at a time, could even go days. The communication is, sometimes there really isn't any. There's so much going on and so many things that are different at times that it's hard to have a conversation about some of it.
So in those moments that it's really difficult and communication stops because one individual might be stonewalling or both of you are stonewalling and coming from a place of fear, one of the things that we can do is perhaps sometimes take a break from those really tough moments. The way that, when you have children or when with my children, we have a timeout or we have a certain word or a certain phrase that we say to one another to say, I'm really at a hard place right now. Perhaps I just need some time to just kind of step away from this, think about it, and then, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes, come back to it, and perhaps I can look at it from a different perspective because I've kind of
Mm-hmm.
processed what you said. Um, have you ever thought about doing something like that within your marriage? Having certain rules that identify a difficult time.
It is not something that I've thought of.
Neither have I.
What value might this have?
Well, I mean, from what we've already experienced, we hit those walls, and we both, you know, go our ways and do what we do. And like I said, we can go hours without talking. And a lot of times you come back to the conversation and neither of us has anything new to say. We're both pretty strong in what it is that we want and what it is that we feel we want to do.
I think that's important, right? You definitely have your own identities. What we can do is we can find ways of um, identifying those moments where we are not so over the line that we just walk straight out of the room or say this conversation's finished, I'm done with it, and storm out. What we can do is perhaps find ways of identifying them and saying, I know that this is building up towards something. Let me take some time and come back to this. And what is something I would like to, if it's possible, for both of you to have an perhaps a secret word or an anecdote at that moment to be able to address it before it gets to that point. Anything that you two can compromise with, that you both can identify? Talk with one another about that.
I really don't know what, I mean, I'm not sure. What about you?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Perhaps what is a word or a statement that you might have that might identify how, when you are in those really tough moments where communication has broken or both of you choose to walk out, a little, maybe something that can happen before that you're able to identify that's getting really, really bad and that you just need some time, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or maybe to go for a walk somewhere and come back to this conversation, especially when you're having those really tough moments in your marriage.
A word or phrase?
Yeah. Something that you both can compromise and say, you know what, that connects with me.
I mean, we could use something as simple as timeout. Let's take a timeout, calm our emotions, so that maybe we can think rationally.
Works.
Yeah, I think that does work, and it's a start, right? It's a start in a difficult process. I see that both of you are really struggling to sometimes find the words to talk about the love and the marriage that you have for the relationship that you have. And I think that works for I think that works, and that's wonderful, and it's a starting point. And if we have a starting point, then we can go somewhere, right?
Yes.
And I will go so far as to say, Hubble, you may have to be the one to initiate it, because I know that when I go there, I'm probably a little louder and more outspoken than you. So when I'm in the moment, I'm probably not going to be the one to do that.
Okay. As long as I'm not too far gone myself.
Okay. Well, look at the time. We are at the end of our session. Thank you, both of you, and I look forward to seeing perhaps what you can do is this week when you both do get to that point, identify that, set that in place, and then we can talk about in the next session of how that went, and if that worked, then perhaps we can build on that, or if it didn't work, we can find another method that might work for both of you, to hear both of each other's narratives more clearly and from different frame of minds and different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, thank you. and see you next session. Okay.
It'll email it to you. If you hit cloud record, it'll email it to you.
Do you want to stop the cloud recording?
Yep.